Welcome to the Mavens Do It Better podcast. And now, your host, Heather Newman.
Hello, everyone. Here we are for another episode of the Mavens Do It Better podcast, where we interview extraordinary experts who bring a light to our world, where we talk about technology, we talk about brand, we talk about what sparks people to be and do all the things that they are in the world. And I am here with Greg Frick from Zones, who I've known a long time. And we're sitting here. Where are we, Greg? Tell everybody.
We're in Orlando, Florida at Ignite.
Yes.
Ignite 2019.
Absolutely. And we just stepped into the podcasting center in Community Central in the Hub. And I had booked this time, and I hadn't really planned a guest. I thought, I'm going to book a time, and funnily, you didn't even know this, but like magically, I was like, you know what? I'm probably going to like talk to somebody. And you said such amazing things when we were having our conversation out front, and I was like, hey, want to do a podcast about what we were talking about? So serendipity.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
It is funny. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and what's great here at Ignite is they have this whole podcasting center, and what also happened is we came in, and I'm using a 4HN Pro Zoom, which I record on all the time, and I usually am not super fancy. I'm getting fancier, but I usually just pop the record button on, and you know, Greg was watching this whole transaction, and we have this beautiful audio techs here, and we're looking at this great equipment. Julius and Jim were like, well, if you let me plug in some stuff, I can make you sound a whole lot better. And I don't know, how do you feel on these fancy
I'm completely loving them.
I know, right?
The sound is awesome.
So, yeah, we feel like we're on NPR. So
yes, absolutely.
That's pretty
Listen
great.
to a lot of radio in my car, and this is that same sort of intimate, nice tone. So
that's awesome. So we were chatting outside about life. We were chatting outside about technology. Will you tell everybody a little bit about, let's talk about Zones for a second and what you do.
Sure.
and sort of how you got to that place in your life. Work.
I'm a senior solution engineer at Zone. So I work on customer projects in the M365 space. So it could be things like migrations. It could be modern intranet. It could be Teams adoption.
Right.
It could be any of those kind of issues that people are looking at. It sometimes bleeds into security, bleeds into Office 365 settings and governance and ways to keep your environment safe.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing
currently.
Yes, that's my current gig, and it's been a great experience. The company's values training, and that was one of the things. There's a meta value to that. I went in and they had like a week of training, and it wasn't really relevant to my job, but the meta experience was that when you're being onboarded and you see an organization that has invested in teaching and learning and passing along the message, and there's professionals and they're updating content and they're trying to get a message across. So we're always learning, right? And so whether we're learning the exact content or we're learning because of the environment we're in, we're always learning, and so I value that about the organization, and looking forward to that journey wherever it takes me.
That's super cool. I know we were talking outside, and you said a couple of things that I just was like, love it. And one, I use that hashtag always learning all the time. First of all, and you just said that twice, which is kind of awesome. And then we were talking a little bit about adoption, and you were talking about the IT of no, which I thought was really interesting. And I was like, I want you to write a blog post about that. But maybe could you talk about that a little bit? I love that comment.
Well, the IT of no is, my belief is that people are constantly making risk-reward calculations. And I think in IT sometimes, especially in the cloud where things are so rapidly changing, that if IT isn't resourced properly, then it's so much and this has always been true in IT, right?
Sure.
It's a lot of times it's easier to say no and stop the deployment or the rollout, or try to figure out, and that kind of can take your energy away, right? So if you're in an organization and you're trying to develop a solution, or you're trying to move forward with your business, and there's something you need to do or something that you want to try even, and then it runs into the wall. I think when Microsoft does the citizen developer stuff, and the Power Platform and things
Right.
like that, and before that InfoPath and SharePoint Designer Workflows.
Yeah.
The idea was people that are engaged and interested and creative, they're creators, right?
Yeah.
So they're getting energy from the fact that they're in an environment and their expertise, and they can focus on a business solution that can deliver value to their organization at the same time. And I think this is really important. They experience growth and fulfillment, right?
Right.
It's fulfilling and validating their special talents. And so when the brakes get put on everything, not only do you not get that application, and you can have a long conversation about, well, these citizen developed applications aren't governable. You can have that conversation, and you should.
Right.
But you also have that effect of training
Yeah.
your employees that if they want to innovate or try something new, they're not going to be able to.
Right.
And then if you get trained that a number of times, you don't try anymore.
Yeah, you get shot down enough, you stop trying, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you pop the balloon. It's like, all right, well, the party's over, and why should I even do this again?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. That's hard. I think that's an interesting thing with, all the talk around adoption and training is that there's so many customers and that I've seen as well that they'll get an initiative started, and then the person that's the champion, the one
Right.
champion, they leave, they move on, they get frustrated or whatever, and then the whole thing falls apart. So to me, a lot of the times talking about that, it's like that's why you have more of a team collaboration when you're trying to do adoption or when you're trying to push or roll something out, and it can't just be all one person holding the cards.
So the other place I went in our conversation out
Yeah.
front was about improv.
Yes,
And the
yes.
relationship between improv and teamwork.
Mhm.
And it completely connects to these topics that we're discussing, because this idea of like that one person leaving and then the initiative sort of petering out, losing energy.
Mhm.
I mean, I've experienced that too. I was involved with setting up communities of practice at the University of Washington. And
Sure. I'm a Husky. Go Huskies.
Yeah, yes, you are.
Yeah.
Husky. Go Huskies. And it was great to work there, and it was great to have the opportunity to do that. And I was also on a community of practice. Like we were
Oh, wow.
looking at finding ways to support and grow communities of practice. And there is this idea that if there isn't that sort of one person pushing and driving, that
Right.
they'll peter out. Because there's this idealistic idea that I'll just launch this ship and it will carry on its own.
Right.
But it needs to be, it needs an energy input. It needs to be okay. It needs to be valued, I think. And the segue I was going to make with improv was this concept of an ensemble. And so in some of the improv books that I've been reading, the most recent one is The Art of Is by Stephen Nachmanovich.
Okay.
There's this concept of an ensemble. So he's a musician, so he's talking about improv also in the context of making music.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And so the thing that gets created in an ensemble is a product of all the people in the ensemble.
Yep.
And that's part of the culture, and that's what people negotiate and learn.
Yeah.
If you're in a musical group and you don't learn to work with your ensemble, you might not be in that music group
You
for
get
long. Right? It's just, yeah. and we even see, like if you ever watch the Muppets,
Yeah.
you've seen Animal going nuts on
Yeah.
the drum, right? He Animal goes into his own thing and he's not part of the group anymore. Like so
Yeah.
in jazz, if
Right.
you watch jazz, I mean, people do a little head nod, it passes off to
Yep.
the other musician, and they're playing together. They're working. They're connecting their music to what the other musicians
Yeah.
are doing.
It's improvisation, but improvisation is about like the energy and the beats and you're riffing off each other, and right,
Yeah,
it's
you're
like,
saying yes.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
saying
you're saying
yes.
yes.
So you
Yes.
go nuts on your guitar, Heather.
Mhm.
Why don't you bring your guitar up and? No.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I'm listening to that. I'm gonna take that as an offer, and I'm gonna say yes, and I'm
Right.
gonna contribute what I have to contribute. And then
Yep.
like comedy or theatrical improv, there's that concept too of saying yes and a
Yep.
lot of people have read this because it's been all over. It's in you can just Google it. It's going to be in articles in Forbes. It's
Yeah.
going to be in HBR. It's all around us. And the practice of it is sort of exercising these muscles of saying yes, and then we can do that. We had 2 of those experiences this morning. Right now,
Yeah.
I'm walking through the hall. I want to go to see what's new with private channels. I
Aha.
see Heather Newman and I say, "Hey, Heather Newman," and we start a little conversation.
Yep.
And then that conversation had full eye contact and personal connection.
Yep.
And Heather said, "Do you want to go and do a podcast? Would you like to talk about that?" And so now sometimes I'm very much aware of my no, that's okay. I don't want to be a bother, or let someone else. There's a way that, you have that sort of resistance.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. Maybe it's because we'd had a good conversation leading up to it, but I just said yes.
Yeah.
I will do this. I don't know what I will say, but if we're going to talk about teamwork and engagement and improv and personal growth and humans and humanity in IT and what engagement is and that it's a spark, then we can have a podcast and I don't have to know what's going to come out of my mouth because I've thought about this so much and talked to so many people and very much energized about it. So
absolutely. No, it's pretty cool. Do you know I was a theater major?
Yes.
At UW.
The University of Washington.
So I the thought of improv and ensemble to me is huge because people are always, a lot of people are like, you're a theater major, and they're like, I'm not surprised that you're a theater major, but they go, technology, and I go, yeah. The thing is that I honestly always have approached everything like I am in the play, because I've been a director, I'm a playwright and an actor, and it is like even looking at something like Ignite, right? Your speakers are your actors. There's people who are producers who help pay for it, which are our sponsors. You've got the directors, people who run the show. We've got sets around us, lights. We've got this beautiful equipment around us. So, like, to me, it's like, and the audience are the attendees. Without one of those parts, this doesn't work. Right? And so, honestly, like, that's how I approach and have approached business working at Microsoft my entire career. Because that's where I come from.
You would love the Applied Improv. There's a network called the Applied Improv Network. It's AIN. The conference last year was in Stony Brook, New York.
Oh, fun.
I attended that. So when I told you I went to improv camp. Well, when I was on their Facebook group, I learned from Erica Marks, amazing woman, generous woman as well. So she said, oh, well, here's this Applied Improv Network conference. I went to their conference in Stony Brook, and one of the themes was, we're always on stage. And as I was sharing too, this is a related idea, but as I was sharing on that Facebook group about being a little nervous, like I'm not an improv performer.
Sure.
I haven't gotten on stage. I've stood up in front of groups and I kind of like it. I've kind of riffed that way, but I haven't done like comedy improv.
Sure.
So I thought, oh, everybody else will. And so I felt that sort of uncomfortable fear, nervous thing as I was posting on the Facebook group. And I said, but one person said, just kind of reframed it as not what's going to happen when I go there, but what I'm going to bring to it. Like I have an opportunity when I go to that conference to show up with my full self. And sometimes I joke around and I say, bring my full Gregness, with me as I go.
That's awesome.
And that was a good switch. That changes. Just that emotional experience of being from what's going to happen, I'm nervous, to I get to bring, I get to give something, right? Yeah. How many times if someone asks you for help, do you say yes? And then when you need help, do you have a hard time asking? It seems kind of natural, but it doesn't work without the one doesn't work without the other.
Agreed.
And so going out and trying to be a full participant in that conference, and the idea that we're always on that I'm making the connection between that idea. You've been bringing this through your whole career of theater and on stage and communication, and you're creating an experience. It's not like you're not there. It also leads to a lot of empathy because you're also allowing yourself to experience possibilities. Like if you grow up with a narrative and a story that you're this kind of a person that does this kind of stuff, but then you play a character that does something different, now you just expanded yourself, and now you're not just that kind of person. The possibility for you being other kinds of people, whatever those stories are, starts to expand and open up.
Yeah, you just said so many things that you're gonna make me a little misty, like seriously, because it's so, you've said it so eloquently. It's interesting too. I'm sitting here looking at you, and behind you are all of these. We're right behind the global D&I, the diversity and inclusion booth with all these people and talking about empathy and all of that. And, to me, theater is empathy, right? If we can walk a mile in somebody's shoes, we can see somebody's story on stage, we can understand them, understand the world, start with ourselves, with changing a little bit about how we think about things. And you and I were talking about that a little bit, about how, if like our own biases about different things when we're, talking to someone, and it's like, how do we look at things in a different way? There was a tweet that I think it was Sonia Cuff that put it out. It was about someone had come up to a booth and sort of made an assumption that the gal at the booth, wouldn't be able to answer the technical questions, and it spawned this huge, long tweet chain. And I think it's all about where we're working on changing our perceptions of what our biases are and what we assume, and all of that. And I think that begins with a lot of that empathy of being able to see something through somebody else's eyes. And we don't always think about that. We just think the world is our frame, our own frame of reference, and people are just like us. People are so not just like us, you know what I mean? Have you experienced some of this stuff in the Humans of IT, and have you gone to any of those sessions?
I have. I signed up for Humans of IT, and I found. I mean, it's an interesting conversation because I have a long history of being in meetings where there's a code of conduct where you don't share personal stories outside of the meeting, and
the vault.
Yeah, that you create a safe environment, and it's part of the code. So I was having a hard time translating into because the women that we're talking about were clearly moved by the personal disclosure of other people, right? Because we all are, right? When someone says, I'm afraid, or I'm scared, or I'm at Ignite, and I think everybody else knows each other and nobody knows me, and I'm all alone. Or Universal Park, I could have gone dark at Universal Park. I went there alone. I didn't. I had fun. Then I ended up hooking up with Christian, and I followed on his little crew as we went on ride after ride after ride until we absolutely couldn't go on any more rides. But I just, it's just a story. And so like when you share that and disclose, personal vulnerability, people do feel closer, and it's true. And it's true. Like what's true from me is, like you say, we are all different, but in one way that we're the same is that we sometimes compare what we feel on the inside to how people look on the outside.
Absolutely.
Social media is that's the backlash of social media is everybody looks at social media and they say, wow, everybody has perfect lives and they're all happy all the time and they're all at the beach and they're all in love and they have great dogs that can do cool tricks and I don't have any of right because you're comparing your insides to their outsides and their presentation and so being free of that is super important.
And we sort of started our conversation with that a little bit, just sort of catching up and made the comments of, about like what you see out there. And I was sharing a little bit about, I was like, I wrote recently about my own journey through some burnout that I had and shared some personal things with you. Because, we don't know each other all that well. Nope. But I was like, I don't know. Like, I was like, I like him. I trust him. I'm going to tell him some stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think that also, we then sort of, our conversation kind of opened up a little bit more, and I was just like, wow, cool. I'm so happy I'm having this conversation with you. You know what I mean? Like, truly. And I think it is what you see on, social media. You're like, you make an assumption about people's lives, about what they're doing, or, they're going here and then doing this and all of that stuff. But you have no idea what they may be going through, and not everybody writes about stuff like I do in particular, or talks about issues because I just can't stop doing it, or whatever. But, a lot of people don't have that kind of outlet. And so like one-on-one conversations when we're at conferences like this or with our friends are kind of what we do, or we don't talk about it at all. And it gives us some terrible disease because we don't talk about these things, I don't know. So I just thank you for that. It was really wonderful to like have that moment with you. And then I was like, let's go talk at the podcast center. Right. But I wanted to talk about, Tell me your origin story, if you would. Like your IT, where you're from, and all that good stuff. Will you give a little bit of flavor on that?
Yeah. So like if we're doing like a story arc, I went to UMass Amherst and I studied anthropology.
Oh wow.
And and so I joked I was like the closest I could come to studying ology. Right? So I found that fascinating and I loved. And I gave a rap, and I used to discount my rap, but I'm finding out that it's actually true. And the pitch would be I'm studying anthropology because I want to learn about how organizations work and how cultures work and how information is exchanged and how power is exchanged so that I can affect positive social change. And, and then I then went through a period of my life where I discounted that story. Because I thought, that was just a story. I was tricking myself, thinking that that's what I was interested in. Here I am in technology now, many years later. And so I'll fill in that arc a little bit more. But just to jump from here to there, now I find myself fascinated by when we talk about teamwork and like one of the things that I've found motivating is that maybe I can help someone else realize their potential. Like I can recognize or elevate people by saying, hey, wow, you're really smart. That was a great solution. I didn't think of that, but you thought of that. And have this sort of way of like enjoying the experience of, being in technology, but having people be more fulfilled and be validated for sort of their unique gifts and their skills,
Sure.
right? Because it does take someone who's tenacious and creative and innovative and interested and energized to kind of dig into this. Like, so if someone is, an administrative assistant and they say, I think I can do that in Power Apps, and then they spend their time on the online videos and find a way, and then they get they find a way to do it, and then they bring all this value, their perspective of their organization. So they experience this trajectory. So I find it satisfying to be a part of that. So that also ties into teamwork and how do we work together. I haven't been on as many teams as I'd like, where at the end of the year, we all look at each other and go, my God, we did that. Right? That experience of being so much better than I am as an individual because of the team. And that's that elusive draw of like teamwork. And I find Microsoft Teams appealing because it's just a platform in which some of that can happen. The product is technology, and the way that it happens is people.
Right.
And so I find like, I'm back to that thing with like, studying the way organizations work and communication flows and how power is distributed and how that affects other people in the dynamic. That's also true in platforms and collaboration platforms as well.
Yeah.
So I didn't get a high-paying anthropology job after I left University of Massachusetts. I didn't actually even graduate. But I was interested in social issues, so I worked for MassPerg for a few years, and then I worked for a campaign on national health care. And a lot of that was outward stuff where I was talking to strangers and asking them to listen or to buy into an idea.
Right.
And so then I thought, okay, well, I need to get a real job. That's what I was thinking. That was the dialogue, right? Because whatever.
I did the same thing. I was like, I had my day job, my theater, and then the real job,
So I got into computers many, many years ago. Leading Edge was one of the companies I worked for. Another company was Mosaic, which made a clone of Lotus 123. A lot of listeners might not know what Lotus 123 was, but it defined, it was why people bought PCs back in the 80s. They wanted to use Lotus 123. And so I went to Comdex in 1986, and then I've had this sort of career in Massachusetts working in IT. I was a Novell administrator. I was when I discovered the internet, I thought it was amazing, and I set up web servers and got into web, and I was a webmaster for a startup in Massachusetts. And when I was a webmaster, I got intoxicated by directories because the idea of having to log into different systems was stupid. That's the way it used to be. There was like a login on this one and a login on this one, and you had to remember all of them, and it was all in the same company.
Right.
And so I ended up getting into directory services, and I got a job at Siemens in their fledgling networking communications group.
Wow.
And that was when they saw the writing on the wall about converged voice and stuff. And so, but then I thought life must mean more, and I took a couple of years off, and I lived in a Korean Zen temple in near Boston College and studied Shimgumdo, which is a martial arts with a sword. So mind sword path. I was a fencer, so I liked swords anyway. So, and then after that, I was running out of money, so I volunteered at a Tibetan Buddhist temple in Northern California, and I helped build the Chintamani temple at Odeon. You can Google it.
Where is that exactly?
It's in Northern California.
Yeah, where?
The mailing address is Cazadero, but if you're going up Route 1, it's 7 miles in on from Stewart's Point.
Okay, I lived in Sebastopol for a long time.
That's the area.
I know where that is. I was like, wait, wow.
So I volunteered there. So yeah, and my suggestion to listeners is don't get into construction when you turn 40.
It's painful.
It is, It's like you're not working on a bench.
Right.
You're on your back or you're stretched out. It's painful. So then when I finished that volunteer commitment, my brother said, why don't you live with me in Seattle? And so I moved in with my brother, and then I found myself needing to get back into IT, and I got back into IT by way of being a trainer. And I found SharePoint, and SharePoint was a validation of all the other stuff I did with, web and intranets and communications, and I loved SharePoint, and so I stayed in the SharePoint realm, and that's how we came to meet, was in the SharePoint realm.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people in SharePoint that have stories like that.
Yes.
Yours is probably like that. You were.
Oh yeah. Mine is a theater connection. So Nancy McSherry Jensen.
I don't know who that is.
She was the first group product manager for SharePoint back in 2001.
Yeah.
She's married to Andy Jensen, who I went to theater school with.
Oh, wow.
And I was doing arts marketing in Seattle for Open Circle Theater and a bunch of other theaters. My own theater, Grex. I had a theater company. And yeah, I got laid off from a job. I was working at an engineering firm that made digital camera parts that went on Fuji and Kodak. You know, those things that were actually cameras and digital cameras, not our phones with film. They added pieces to them. Oh, you're fine. And so yeah, I got laid off from that job and was looking for something. And he was like, "Hey, you're doing all this great marketing for the arts. You should talk to Nancy. She's running this like new kind of startup thing at Microsoft that, you know, brand new." And I was like, "Okay." So I went and we talked, and she needed somebody to write and produce the first 150 case studies for this thing called SharePoint. And they were still calling it Tahoe at the time too. So it was SharePoint Portal Server, SharePoint Team Services, and we talked, and she gave me the job, and I said, like you were talking about saying yes. I was 29 at the time, and I just kept saying yes. You know, she would say, "Do you know how to put together a partner book and blah, 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 and do you know how to do this and do that?" And I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. You know, I mean, I've always been a producer, and so putting things together, that ensemble thing, totally, you know, like I can do it, and I learned, and I mean, I just kept saying yes, you know, and then that's when it diverted when we SharePoint conference. That was an idea. I talked to Jeff Teeper about that this week, actually, about that first one, and deciding to do that event and asking Mr. Gates to be our keynote and stuff. And these were all just like ideas that we all had of like, should we do this? And then Heather, hey, call up literally handed a piece of paper. There's 60 partner names on this list. Go call them because we need a SharePoint ecosystem and we need partners to validate the product that they're using it and building on it. Go call them. I'm like, so that was my entree new, and I've said yes for 18 years in various and different ways as a full-time vendor consultant, a partner, now an MVP, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, like it's the power of going, hi SharePoint. And SharePoint, I know, the community of SharePoint is just massive and also so strong. I mean, you probably have friends all over the place too from that.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
And the generosity is amazing. Like when you think about, like, if you're at work, sometimes you write an email and you look at your watch and you just spend an hour writing an email. Yeah. Well, now think about all these people that are doing things in SharePoint and they're publishing these amazing blog posts with instructions and screenshots.
Yes.
And then they respond to comments. The gift of that contribution is amazing. And so there are so many people that have done that in the community. And I had an experience where in my last job, it wasn't going so great. I wasn't getting along with my manager. Yeah. And I was feeling kind of tapped out. Well, I'd been the president of the Puget Sound SharePoint user group for years. Yeah. And so I was at this Office 365 Saturday, and I told people when they said, "How are you doing?" I told them, like in the past, I might have said at different times, "Oh, fine." Right. And did
you say you went into your high voice?
I did. "Oh, fine."
I did the same thing when well, it's a tell when we're lying.
Yeah, maybe.
Go up here. It's all all good.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's great.
Yeah, we're gonna stay down here. It's great. It's good.
Anyway. Living the dream. So yeah. So I told people what was going on, and it was amazing. People's eyes softened, and then they said that they saw me. So people said things like, "No, but you know, they were comparing me as the guy up in the front of the room, you know, hosting the meetings and creating the space." Right. And some of the people I talked to had been in my training classes, and one person said, "No, you're really good at this stuff," and just stuff that, you know, we don't always get the luxury of hearing all the positive stuff all the time. Absolutely. But as I was describing my challenges, I was getting a lot of positive encouragement and feedback, and I left that. So I got the sessions that I went to at that Office 365 Saturday that were great, and I learned something. Yeah. But even more importantly was the connection to the community and that sense that I was seen and heard and valued. And that's the thing that I think as human beings that we want. We want to be, and I say that, you know, I said that in my session at the Office 365 meetup last month was like, yeah, we just want to be loved, we want to belong, and we want to be valued. Absolutely. You know, and well, you know, and that's where I think engagement comes from. Yeah. You know, we're not always going to get a hug, or we don't want it disingenuous either. We want it We know the difference, right? When people's eyes soften and then you see them as a person and you realize that you weren't seeing them as a person.
Yeah.
Maybe you were in your, I get into a cocktail party mode.
Yeah.
Like if I'm in a social event, like with a community, I can be like, I have to talk to everybody for 30 seconds.
Right. Yes. The handshake and hello. Yeah.
And then, but when you make that connection and it's real, it's like, oh wait, no, I don't know. I mean, that's so valuable.
Absolutely.
It defies time, right? Because we get into productivity. Yeah. Early in my technical career, I found myself being challenged by communications with other people. And I realized that what had happened is the computer technology that I work in had influenced the way I was looking at the world. So I was almost interacting with people at work like doing a handshake, knack, and then saying, ready to transmit. And then when they acknowledged, I would then give them the data, and then I would close the connection and walk off. Maybe a checksum or no. I wouldn't necessarily even know if it was valid, right? The packet had been received.
Right.
Like, and I was like, that's not the way humans work.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I studied anthropology, so I know there are tribes where it's a long ritual of, how's your mother? How's your father? How are your children? Like where you ask about everybody in the family before you see if you can buy the cow.
Wow. Right. There's a ritual and protocol to certain things in how you interact with each other. Yeah. I do, I'm sometimes my companies are not brick and mortar. HQ is my place, for both of them. And it is hard sometimes, to feel that connection. I think that's why it's great to see people bring their teams to stuff like this, because you get to bond and then us as a community, we get to bond and all of that. And I really appreciate that, because I do feel disconnected sometimes. And I love, Caruana you was just in her session.
I was just in her session.
Caruana Gatimu, who works on the Teams team and does the Champions program and so many other things, who's a good friend and colleague, and, talking about like putting on the Teams video, that we're sort of forcing function of like turning your video on just so we get more of that connection. And Teams has made that part of the product fun, by giving us the backgrounds and giving us the blurs and all, and making it a point to be like, turn your video on, make that connection with people, and a bunch of gals and I were on a call. It was early in the morning and I was in a bathrobe because my commute is pretty close to my office, and we all decided to turn on our videos, and I was like, who's in pajamas? And people were like, and I was like, everybody's got to put their video on, and we like put the video on. And we were like, we laughed for a second and we're like, okay, let's get down to business. You know what I mean? And then we had our meeting, and like, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter what we were, that we weren't made up or had ponytails in and whatever, and I think like that to me is just like amazing and awesome. Like you couldn't do that not that long ago. You know what I mean? And it's also depending on the team and the person and all that. And don't get me wrong, I get gussied and put curlers in my hair and whatever.
Totally understood. But just think about the thing that stands out is my observation is that I've seen a lot of meetings where people don't turn their webcams on. And these are meetings where people are trying to do business with each other. Yeah. And they don't turn their webcams on. Yep. And I think it's one of these social, like I was talking to someone else, like if you see a piece of litter on the ground, right? Moop. If you see some on the ground, right? There's some worlds that you're in where you will pick it up every single time because it's part of the culture. But if I was in the convention hall and I saw something on the ground, I wouldn't pick it up. Because, part of it is that there are 20 other people just walk by it and they didn't pick it up. And so for me to pick it up is to run counter to the tribe and the society and the culture that I'm in. So it's riskier. I feel it is riskier. And so if people don't have any encouragement to turn on their webcams, if they don't learn that, that's 90% of what we do when we communicate with people doesn't happen via our voice.
Correct.
Right. It happens via body language and seeing people and getting a connection. You look at a puzzled face, you give more clarity. Right. And so that picking up that litter is sort of like, wow, we almost need to learn that. If you think about Burning Man, the message of picking up Moop is over and over again. It's in the literature. It's part of it. You learn it. You don't leave matter out of place. Yep. You pick it up.
Moop, M-O-O-P, matter out of place, for those of you who haven't been to Burning Man. But
it's not part of the rest of our world. And so when I came back from Burning Man, I was like, I picked stuff up and then I stopped because I didn't. I was. It's like being in an elevator. I mean, you turn and face the door.
I get it. Yeah.
You don't have to.
That leave no trace. And also, that's one of the 10 principles of Burning Man. Yeah. And Greg has been, I have been, I've talked about this before. And so, yeah, we were talking about Burning Man a little bit too, and about that sort of, belonging that comes from there. And then sort of some of these things that are the principles of Burning Man. And yeah, I get it. It's like I walk around here too, and, I do pick things up, but I also, for my event planning days, it's like I can't.
No, absolutely.
I can't see things and stuff. But there's other things that I think we could put in that example.
Absolutely. And that's why I gave it.
Yeah. No, it's a great example because it is true. It's like, somebody needs help with a box or something, or somebody drops something on a subway and their hands are full. It's like, people just like I stand there and like look, and you're like, okay, the woman obviously, or the man, or who, it doesn't matter what gender or whatever, but somebody just dropped something from their hands. Their other hands are full. Get up and pick it up and hand it to them. You know what I mean? And maybe that's not my place to say that, and maybe it's okay. Maybe that person doesn't want help, because sometimes you try to help somebody and they're like, I'm fine, and whatever. But it's like, it's one of those things where it's like,
I was trying to make the connection too between the behavior and why we don't turn on our cameras on our webcams.
Right.
It's like and I think it's related. It's similar to why we don't put our profile pictures in teams, like in an organization. If there's no pictures, why won't people do that? And it's like, partly I think it's because everybody else is walking by that litter, and so they walk by it too. In this case, it's not litter. It's just that nobody else has their pictures in the profile, and so they don't. And other people don't turn on their webcam, so they don't. And they don't hear that message. So like when we think about teams and teams adoption, it's like, Teams has all the features. You can do anything. And when I say that, by the way, I'm saying that like the engagement with teams isn't for lack of features and functionality. Engagement with teams is for some other reason. And so it's about maybe we don't have a culture where we share knowledge. Maybe we don't want to talk out loud.
Job security.
Maybe we don't know when to talk it one-to-one and when to talk out loud. And and if I expand back from that, I like sometimes think like, why do we expect to all work in offices and cubicles and get along? Like, I mean, humans are great, right? Because we do that on highways, right? Like, I look at highways. I look at highways and I go, I'm surprised there's not accidents every minute, right? Because we're driving 2,000-pound vehicles within 12 inches of each other, and we kind of get along. Yeah. Because we have there's a set of rules and protocols. Right. We probably have some skin in the game.
Yep.
Right.
So. And we don't want our skin on the pavement.
Right. So we can work together. Right. But sometimes it needs to be encouraged, and there needs to be created an environment that's fertile for it. Yeah. So my interest in doing the improv and teamwork is partly to help create that fertile environment where people are learning to listen and to experiment and and try things out, and where the culture of the organization is understands that before you get great at it, you're not going to be great. Right? Like on the way, on the journey, you trip and stumble and make mistakes. So that's a part of it. And that's a principle of improv is, there's the failure bow where you stand up and spread your arms and say, thank you very much, I made a mistake. And you just acknowledge that you made a mistake because you're a human being. Human beings make mistakes. And if you think that they don't, or if you think that nobody else in the room makes mistakes and you're the only one, that separates us. Yep. Now we have to feel like we have to pretend to be something we're not. Yeah. And how can we be fully engaged and fully fulfilled if we're pretending that we're something we're not? Yeah. And so even in technology, even in rolling out teams, even in using SharePoint, even in adoption, even in using Content Panda, where it'll tell you what to do all the time in context while you're trying to do a job. Right. And there needs to be a culture of learning, a culture of encouragement, and knowing that when you don't know how, right, absolutely, that you're learning, and learning looks like you're not doing it very well sometimes. Yeah. Well, what's the quote about not being a know-it-all but a learn-it-all? Yeah. I think that's Satya Nadella. I'm pretty sure. Is it? I think so. That's a good one. Yeah. So there's a Buddhist one which is that similar. It's like to the, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it's to the beginner there are many possibilities. To the expert there are few. There's that idea. Like that. Yeah. That's cool. I think we're going to get kicked out of the room soon, so I want to ask you one last question, if you don't mind. Thank you for the conversation, by the way. Yeah, it's been lovely. So lovely. Even if we didn't have headphones, it would have been fantastic. Totally. Right? I know. I'm like, yay. So I always ask every guest on the podcast if you would share with the listeners and one
or it can be a couple, but maybe what's the sort of spark or moment or person or thing or place? You know, I'm doing the noun song from, you know, back in when we were kids and the junction, you know, that kind of got you to where you are right now in your life. You know, something that you can be like, this really moved me, or you know, somebody or something, you know. I know it's a hard one, but it's also, and it can be a smattering of things as well.
I mean, I'm thinking about my DNA.
Yeah.
I think that I have to attribute a lot of it to listening to my parents have conversations. So my parents would have guests over,
Right.
and as a child, I would be in that room just listening. I couldn't get enough of adult conversations.
Sure.
You know, and
Yeah.
my father read, and there was reading going on in my house, and there was wonderful conversations, and I always loved it. So I think engaging with, and if I were to top, you know, my favorite activities, you know, sometimes it's like, oh, having good conversations
Right.
is one of my favorite activities. I love to, and I think it's the exchange that happens, that you learn, you get challenged, you get acknowledged, you get seen.
Right.
And so I don't know if that's the kind of answer you're looking for, but I think about like, that's also allows me to then explore ideas. It allows me to work on how to say things. Well, I don't mean that, but I mean this.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
hard to fine tune that, right? And kind of experimenting with why it's, you know, when it feels right, you know, kind of, I guess we're always adjusting our little calibrator, right?
Yeah,
Like
we're tweaking the buttons like a DJ, you know?
Yeah. Well, or like a radio
A radio dial,
right?
yeah,
It's
like, give me the
I think about writing like that. It's
Yeah.
like tuning a radio dial. It's like static, static, static. Oh, there's a good station. Static, static, static. Oh, there's a good station.
I love the visual on that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The answer I'm looking for is the answer you gave me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
Thank you for asking me to be on your podcast.
You're welcome.
I love it. Do I get to be a Maven now?
Sure.
Yeah. all right.
Absolutely.
I'm a Maven.
Yeah. Yes. But I feel, you know, it's like the expert comment. That's a really interesting, you know, the Buddhist quote. I think for me, everybody's an expert, you know, in what they do that they care about.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, so yeah, but I'm encouraging people to find their Mavenness, like you were talking about your Gregness, like, you know, it's like, find your Mavenness, like, what are you passionate about? What are you expert about? What fills your soul with joy? You know, that's kind of, for me, that's the dealio. So, yeah. Well, we are almost to the end of Ignite, getting close, after five days.
Yeah.
5 or 6 if you were here for the pre-day. Sitting in that lovely podcast center, that I can't wait to hear this, because I'm hoping it just sounds like butter, because you know the audio you sound so good.
Yeah, our audio sounds really good listening through this headset with this mic.
I know. I told Julius I was going to try and put these in my bag, but I don't think he's going to let me. So anyway, but really, what a treat and serendipitous walk up. Wonderful. Thank you for being on the podcast. It's a delight.
Yeah. The delight was mine.
Yeah.
I get to be on Mavens Do It Better podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, folks, you heard it here. That's another episode of the Mavens Do It Better podcast. And here's to another beautiful day on this big blue spinning sphere. The original music on this podcast was created by Jesse Case.